January 26, 1945, 2:20 in the afternoon. The frozen farmland outside Holtzwihr, France. Smoke hung low over the fields, drifting through shattered trees and churned snow, blurring the line between earth and sky. In the middle of the chaos, something was unfolding that defied every rule of modern warfare. A lone American soldier stood exposed atop a burning tank destroyer, methodically halting the advance of an entire German company. The attacking force was not ordinary infantry. These were elite mountain troops of the 2nd Gebirgsdivision, hardened veterans, many transferred from Norway specifically for winter combat. Men trained to fight in snow and ice, supported by armored vehicles that had broken resistance across Europe. And yet, their advance had stopped completely. Behind their lines, 6 armored vehicles, Panzer IVs and assault guns, sat motionless. Their commanders refused to move forward without infantry cover. That cover was being erased, one squad at a time, by a single American, who appeared barely more than a boy. He couldn't have weighed more than 50 kilograms. From a distance, it looked impossible. From closer in, it was terrifying. 250 German soldiers had walked into a situation German tactical doctrine declared unthinkable. One man holding ground against a combined arms assault. The numbers were brutal. 40 exhausted Americans faced 250 elite infantry and 6 tanks. Any staff officer would have predicted collapse within minutes. Instead, for nearly an hour, the German attack stalled, then unraveled. The man responsible was 2nd Lieutenant Audie Murphy. The fight had begun minutes earlier along the edge of the Bois de Riedwehr. Murphy's company, Company B, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, had already been ground down by days of constant fighting. Officers were gone, platoons reduced to handfuls of men. Frostbite, exhaustion, and hunger had become constants. Now, as the German assault rolled forward across open ground, Murphy understood exactly what was happening. The Germans believed the Americans were finished. They were wrong. As the first tank destroyer erupted in flames under German fire, Murphy ordered his remaining men to withdraw into the forest. They hesitated. He did not. Instead, he ran forward alone through artillery bursts and machine gun fire toward the burning vehicle. Flames climbed the hull, ammunition cooked off inside. At any moment, it could explode. Murphy climbed onto it anyway. From the top of the wreck, silhouetted against smoke and winter sky, he seized the mounted 50 caliber machine gun and opened fire. German infantry fell in the snow. Others dropped for cover, only to be cut down as they tried to move. Tanks halted again, unable to advance without infantry protection that no longer existed. For the men watching from the tree line, it was unreal. One figure standing upright on a burning vehicle, firing steadily as shells burst around him. He wasn't shouting, he wasn't charging, he was working, calmly and relentlessly, as if nothing else in the world existed. For the German attackers, the effect was devastating. Every attempt to move forward ended the same way. Infantry units dissolved, officers went down, momentum vanished, the advance stalled completely. For 1 hour, the laws of probability ceased to matter. When the firing finally stopped, the field in front of Holtzwihr was littered with bodies. The German assault had broken, the survivors were retreating, and the American line, outnumbered, exhausted, and nearly destroyed, still held. Audie Murphy climbed down from the wreck, wounded and scorched, and walked back toward his men as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. What happened that afternoon would become one of the most extraordinary acts of individual combat in military history. But the road that led Murphy to that burning tank destroyer began far from France, in a place defined not by battle, but by hunger. The path that led Audie Murphy to that frozen field in France began thousands of miles away, in the cotton fields of Hunt County, Texas. He was born on June 20th, 1925, into a life shaped by poverty so severe it left little room for childhood. Murphy was the sixth of 12 children in a family of struggling sharecroppers. Food was scarce, clothing was patched and reused. Responsibility arrived early and stayed. When Audie was 12, his father abandoned the family entirely. 3 years later, his mother died after a long illness, leaving 16-year-old Audie as the primary caretaker for his younger brothers and sisters. There was no safety net, no assistance. If the family was going to eat, it would be because Audie found a way to make it happen. He did it with a rifle. Neighbors remembered the small, quiet boy who spent long days hunting to keep his family fed. Ammunition was precious. Every round cost money they didn't have. Missing was not an option. Over time, necessity shaped ability. Murphy learned to judge distance instinctively. He learned to fire quickly and accurately, often at moving targets. Rabbits, squirrels, anything that could be turned into food. One neighbor later recalled Murphy explaining it simply. If he missed, his brothers and sisters went hungry that night. By his early teens, his reputation as a marksman was well known in the area. He was small for his age, underfed and underdeveloped, but his eyes carried a focus that unsettled people. Calm, cold, calculating. He didn't waste motion. He didn't waste bullets. When news of the attack on Pearl Harbor reached rural Texas, Murphy saw a way out. The military offered steady meals, regular pay, and the ability to send money home. More than that, it offered purpose. But even this escape came with obstacles. At 5 feet 5 inches and barely 110 pounds, Murphy was rejected repeatedly. The Marine Corps turned him away. The Navy did the same. The Army Air Forces wouldn't consider him. Even the paratroopers refused. Only the regular Army infantry accepted him, and even then only after his sister altered his birth records to claim he was 18. On June 30th, 1942, Audie Murphy became a private in the United States Army. Basic training at Camp Walters, Texas, was brutal. Murphy looked younger than most recruits. Drill instructors targeted him immediately. He was mocked, pushed harder, and singled out as weak. Other trainees assumed he wouldn't last. One soldier who trained alongside him later recalled that many believed Murphy was some kind of mascot, not a future infantryman. But something changed when rifles were issued. On the range, Murphy was untouchable. His shots were consistent, controlled, exact. He didn't flinch, he didn't rush. His instructors noticed, other soldiers noticed. The same men who had laughed at him now watched in silence as he outshot everyone around him. There was something unsettling about the transformation. When Murphy raised a rifle, the boy disappeared. In his place was someone else entirely, focused, detached, and precise. The poverty, the hunger, the years of responsibility had carved something into him that training alone could not create. By the time Murphy completed basic training, it was clear he was not ordinary. He was not physically imposing, he did not seek attention, but when it came time to fight, he possessed something rare and dangerous: the ability to act decisively under pressure without hesitation or emotion. That quality would soon be tested under fire. Audie Murphy's transition from a capable soldier to a truly lethal one began in July 1943 on the rocky shores of Sicily. Company B of the 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, landed as part of General George Patton's 7th Army during the Allied invasion. The beaches were chaotic, the terrain unforgiving, and the enemy experienced. For Murphy, it was the first time his skills would be tested against men who intended to kill him in return. In the mountains inland from the landing zones, Murphy discovered something that would shape the rest of his life. He was not just competent under fire, he was exceptionally effective. The same instincts that had kept his family fed in Texas now kept his unit alive. He moved quietly, used terrain naturally, and fired with deliberate precision. Fear did not paralyze him, it narrowed his focus. Near Palermo, Murphy's platoon was pinned down by German machine gun fire. The position was well sighted, covering the approach routes and halting the advance. Without waiting for orders, Murphy worked his way forward alone, using folds in the ground for concealment. He closed on the gun crew and destroyed the position with grenades. Then he turned the captured weapon on retreating German troops, breaking the engagement. His company commander, Captain Paul Harris, took note. Murphy was recommended for the Bronze Star. The citation described a soldier who demonstrated extraordinary aptitude for combat, despite his youth and inexperience. It was an understatement. Italy hardened him further. At the Volturno River crossing in October 1943, Murphy's unit came under fierce counterattack. German forces struck with determination, and Murphy's squad was nearly wiped out. When the attack threatened to overrun their position, Murphy seized a sniper rifle and began engaging German troops at extreme range. One by one, he eliminated advancing soldiers, halting the assault long enough for reinforcements to arrive. For that action, Murphy received the Distinguished Service Cross. He was 18 years old. Those who fought alongside him noticed something unsettling. Murphy did not fight with anger or adrenaline, he fought with cold efficiency. One sergeant later described it as watching someone perform calculations under fire. Identify target, eliminate target, move to the next. There was no hesitation, no visible emotion, just relentless effectiveness. The Anzio campaign pushed him further. That beachhead, described by Winston Churchill as a wildcat clawing at the shore, was a place of constant danger. German artillery pounded Allied positions day and night. Counterattacks came without warning. It was there that Murphy earned his first Silver Star. When a German tank threatened his unit, Murphy advanced alone with a bazooka, closing to point-blank range before firing. The tank was destroyed. The attack collapsed. By the time Allied forces broke out of Anzio and advanced toward Rome, Murphy was already known up and down the regiment. He had been wounded, he had been decorated, and he had survived conditions that broke many older soldiers. The invasion of southern France in August 1944 marked another turning point. During the advance north from the Mediterranean coast, Murphy's platoon was ambushed near Montélimar. His platoon leader was killed instantly. Without hesitation, Murphy took command. With just 18 men, he organized a defensive position at a critical crossroads. German forces numbering over 100 attacked repeatedly. For 2 hours, Murphy directed fire, maneuvered his men, and personally engaged enemy troops. 15 German soldiers were killed. The crossroads held. For his leadership under fire, Murphy was promoted on the battlefield to second lieutenant on October 14, 1944. By the winter of 1945, the transformation was complete. The underfed Texas farm boy had become a combat officer shaped by nearly 2 years of continuous fighting. Sicily, Salerno, Anzio, Rome, southern France. He had watched friends die. He had killed without hesitation, and he had learned the brutal arithmetic of survival in modern war. That experience would soon be tested more severely than ever before. By January 1945, Audie Murphy was no longer recognizable as the teenager who had joined the army less than 3 years earlier. Combat had stripped away whatever youth remained. He was 19 years old, but his face carried the exhaustion of someone far older. Nearly everyone he had trained with was gone, killed, wounded, or evacuated. Murphy himself had been wounded multiple times and carried injuries he rarely mentioned. Company B entered the Colmar Pocket under conditions that bordered on hopeless. The pocket was an 800-square-mile German bridgehead west of the Rhine River, the last remaining foothold the Wehrmacht held on French soil. Adolf Hitler had ordered it defended at all costs. German commanders reinforced it with some of their best remaining units, including the 2nd Mountain Division, veterans of cold-weather warfare in Norway and the Eastern Front. For the American soldiers tasked with eliminating the pocket, winter was as dangerous as the enemy. Snow covered the ground in deep drifts. Temperatures hovered around freezing, dropping lower at night. Artillery fire had churned the terrain into frozen mud and jagged ice. Digging foxholes was nearly impossible. Weapons malfunctioned. Frostbite was common. Company B paid heavily. In the 5 days leading up to January 26th, the unit suffered catastrophic losses. 102 men were wounded. All officers except Murphy were either killed or evacuated. From an authorized strength of 187 soldiers, the company was reduced to just 40 effectives. Murphy was now the sole officer present. He was wounded himself, shrapnel in the leg from fighting 2 days earlier, but he said nothing. Pain was secondary. Leadership mattered more. The men were exhausted beyond measure. Sleep came in brief, freezing intervals. Food was scarce and often eaten cold. Machine guns froze solid despite constant maintenance. Ammunition had to be rationed. The forest provided concealment but little comfort. As dawn approached on January 26th, Murphy surveyed their position along the edge of the Bois de Outnumbered. In front of them stretched nearly a mile of open ground leading to the German-held village of Holtzwihr. There was nowhere to hide if the enemy attacked across that field. Murphy positioned what remained of his company as effectively as possible. 2 M10 tank destroyers offered the only anti-armor capability. Infantry positions were thin and fragile, stretched along the wood line. Murphy established his command post in a shallow drainage ditch that provided limited cover and allowed him to observe the approach. Crucially, field telephone lines connected him to supporting artillery. Those guns were his only real advantage. Without them, Company B would be overrun. The German attack began shortly after 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Artillery fire tore through the trees as shells detonated overhead, showering American positions with splinters and debris. The barrage lasted half an hour. To the men enduring it, time lost meaning entirely. When the shelling lifted, they knew what came next. German armor appeared first. 6 tanks advanced in formation, antenna pennants visible against the snow. Behind them came infantry, hundreds of men wearing white camouflage, moving steadily across the open field. Veterans, disciplined, confident. Murphy immediately called for artillery support, but he knew artillery alone would not stop them. The Germans were moving fast, spread wide, pressing forward with methodical precision. At 600 yards, the M10s opened fire. They missed. The crews were exhausted. Cold slowed reactions. German return fire was immediate. An 88mm shell slammed into the rear tank destroyer, igniting fuel and ammunition. Flames erupted. The crew escaped and fled towards the woods. The second M10 attempted to reposition but slid into a drainage ditch, its tracks useless on frozen ground. Its crew abandoned it as well. Within minutes, Company B was without armor support. German infantry closed to 200 yards. That was the moment Murphy made his decision. At approximately 4:20 p.m., with both tank destroyers disabled and German infantry advancing rapidly across open ground, Audie Murphy gave an order his men would never forget. He told them to pull back into the woods and establish defensive positions. They hesitated. He did not. Instead of retreating, Murphy sprinted forward through exploding artillery toward the burning M10 tank destroyer. The vehicle was engulfed at the rear, fuel and ammunition cooking off inside the hull. Thick black smoke poured upward, visible for miles. The heat was intense. Any moment, the remaining rounds could detonate, turning the vehicle into a massive fireball. Murphy climbed onto it anyway. He mounted the .50 caliber M2 Browning machine gun fixed to the vehicle's roof. From that position, he was fully exposed, silhouetted against the winter sky with no cover except the smoke rising beneath him. He was alone, standing upright on a burning vehicle while enemy fire swept the field. From the woodline, his men watched in disbelief. The M2 Browning roared to life. Its heavy rounds tore into the advancing German infantry with devastating effect. Murphy fired in controlled bursts, shifting from target to target with calm precision. Squads disintegrated under the fire. Men dropped into the snow and did not rise again. Others attempted to crawl forward, only to be cut down. Murphy maintained telephone contact with supporting artillery throughout the engagement. Calmly, clearly, he adjusted fire missions while firing the machine gun himself. Shells began to fall among the German formations, forcing them to scatter directly into Murphy's fields of fire. German infantry pushed forward repeatedly. Several reached within meters of the burning vehicle before being killed. Murphy did not retreat. He did not pause. He fired until barrels glowed red and smoke filled his lungs. Observers later noted that he wasn't spraying fire indiscriminately. Every burst was deliberate. He aimed, he corrected, he destroyed targets systematically. German officers fell. Machine gun teams were eliminated. Attempted flanking maneuvers collapsed almost immediately. The tanks behind the infantry stalled. Without foot soldiers to protect them from close assault, advancing further meant isolation and destruction. German armored doctrine demanded coordination. That coordination no longer existed. The battlefield became a killing ground. After roughly 40 minutes of continuous firing, Murphy's ammunition began to run low. The burning tank destroyer beneath him settled as metal warped and rubber melted. Smoke thickened. Visibility dropped. German infantry surged again, believing his fire was weakening. Murphy switched weapons. With his carbine, he continued engaging targets at close range while still directing artillery fire. At approximately 3:10 p.m., with enemy soldiers closing to within 10 yards, Murphy made the most dangerous decision of the battle. He ordered artillery fire directly on his own position. The forward observer initially refused, knowing it would likely kill him. Murphy insisted. The first shells landed within 50 yards. Frozen earth and shrapnel exploded outward. German infantry caught in the open were torn apart. Murphy himself was struck by fragments, suffering additional wounds, but he remained on the vehicle. The combined effect of direct fire and artillery shattered the German assault. Surviving infantry began withdrawing toward Holtzwihr. The tanks reversed course, unable to advance without support. By approximately 3:20 p.m., the attack had collapsed entirely. Murphy climbed down from the burning M10 moments before it finally detonated. His uniform was scorched. Blood ran down his leg. He walked back to the woods without urgency, checked on his men, and calmly asked if anyone had been hit by the artillery. The field in front of them was silent. The impossible had happened. When the firing stopped outside Holtzwihr, the battlefield told a story the German survivors would struggle to explain. Bodies lay scattered across the snow-covered fields. Equipment was abandoned mid-advance. What should have been a decisive breakthrough had collapsed into confusion and retreat. American estimates placed German casualties at roughly 50 killed, with many more wounded. The exact number remains uncertain. What is certain is that the German attack never resumed. That night, under cover of darkness, the German forces withdrew entirely from the sector. What followed is one of the most striking absences in the historical record. Despite extensive research in German archives, post-war interviews, and unit histories, no detailed first-hand German accounts of the engagement at Holtzwihr have surfaced. There are no diaries describing the stand, no memoirs recounting the moment, no direct testimonies explaining how a reinforced company was halted by a single American officer. The silence itself is revealing. The German units involved were identified through operational records. The 2nd Mountain Division provided the main infantry force, supported by elements of the 708th Volksgrenadier Division and assault guns from the 285th Battalion. These were not inexperienced troops. They were seasoned veterans, many of whom had fought in Norway, Finland, and on the Eastern Front. Their war diary entry for January 26, 1945, recorded the action in a single, understated line. Attack on American positions near Holtzwihr repulsed with heavy casualties. Enemy resistance stronger than expected. Nothing more. Military historians believe several factors explain the absence of German personal accounts. Casualties were high among those closest to Murphy's position, eliminating many potential witnesses. Records from the final months of the war were often destroyed, and perhaps most importantly, the engagement represented a humiliating tactical failure that contradicted German assumptions about American soldiers. Elite mountain troops were not supposed to break, yet they did. The psychological impact extended far beyond the immediate fight. The failure at Holtzwihr helped seal the fate of the 3rd Infantry Division. The successful defense allowed the 3rd Infantry Division to maintain control of critical terrain dominating the approaches to the village. Holtzwihr itself fell the following day, January 27th. Within weeks, the entire German bridgehead west of the Rhine was eliminated, removing more than 50,000 German troops from the war. Post-war German military analysis later studied the engagement as part of a broader examination of defensive operations against numerically superior forces. Their conclusions cited overconfidence, rigid tactics, and the collapse of combined arms coordination once infantry losses mounted. What they could not quantify was the psychological effect of facing an opponent who refused to break. Murphy's action became doctrine. The U.S. Army would later study the defense as a case example in leadership under fire, integration of artillery and automatic weapons, and the moral component of combat effectiveness. It demonstrated that breaking an enemy's will could be more decisive than destroying their equipment. On June 2, 1945, near Salzburg, Austria, Audie Murphy received the Medal of Honor. The citation, formal and restrained, struggled to convey the reality of what had occurred. It noted that he was alone, exposed to fire from 3 directions, and that his actions killed dozens of enemy soldiers and forced the withdrawal of superior forces. Murphy never spoke of it as heroism. When asked why he climbed onto the burning tank destroyer, he gave the same answer every time. "They were killing my men. I figured if one man could do the job, why risk anyone else?" That simplicity masked the cost. After the war, Murphy struggled with what was then called battle fatigue. Today, it would be recognized as severe post-traumatic stress disorder. He suffered chronic insomnia, recurring nightmares, and hypervigilance. He slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow. At times, he slept in his garage with the lights on, incapable of tolerating darkness. He spoke openly about these struggles at a time when few veterans did. His advocacy helped change public understanding of combat trauma and contributed to the eventual creation of dedicated veterans' mental health facilities. The Audie L. Murphy Memorial VA Hospital in San Antonio stands as part of that legacy. Murphy died in 1971 at the age of 45. Today, the fields outside Holtzwihr are quiet farmland once again. Snow falls, crops grow, shell craters have vanished. But each year, a small ceremony marks the place where one American soldier stood alone and refused to yield. The lesson endures. Murphy's stand was not about fearlessness. By his own admission, he was afraid. It was about choosing to act despite fear when others depended on him. It was about refusing to accept inevitability. About one moment when an ordinary human being became something extraordinary. The Germans who attacked that day encountered something their doctrine could not explain and their numbers could not overcome. They encountered a will stronger than probability. And that is why the silence in their records speaks louder than words.